Hi, welcome to this video. We're going to develop now chapter 34, the influence of monetary and fiscal policy on aggregate demand. Remember, this is a book of Gregory Mankiw, Principles of Economics. So within this chapter, we're going to understand all the movements related with monetary policy and fiscal policy, basically, as well as the tools that are necessary to provide these movements to the curves. During chapter 33, we actually use the impact of monetary and fiscal policy on the economy to explain short-run economic fluctuations. What is the difference between short and long run in economics? In macroeconomics specifically, we're talking about the affectation of prices on basically supply curve. We assume that in the long run there is not any effect or any movement with the long run supply curve respected to prices. So then this is basically the main issue. So we have long run aggregate supply, which is vertical, and the other one should be positive with the prices. There is an affectation in prices with the supply. So we know that any shift in aggregate demand and aggregate supply curve cause fluctuations in the economy's overall output and overall level of prices. So because we are here in the short run, then the idea here is like the policy makers. Who are the policy makers? People that develop from one side fiscal policy, from other side the monetary policy. So they really want to avoid normal adjustment, and intervention could be necessary in order to avoid like any radical movement in these curves. So we have the monetary policy, which is basically managed by the central bank throughout the supply of money. And in the other side, we have the fiscal policy, which is the levels of government spending and taxation set by the president and Congress. During chapter 25 and 26, we had a look how fiscal policy affects savings, investment, and long-run economic growth. During the chapter 29 and 30, we had a look how monetary policy affects in the long run. Here we are going to have these two movements affect the aggregate demand and macroeconomic variables in the short run. So how monetary policy influences aggregate demand? Remember that aggregate demand represents the total quantity of goods and services demanded in the economy for any price level. During the previous chapter, we had a look why the aggregate demand curve slopes downward. The first one, it was the wealth effect. So why? Because lower price level raises the real value of households' money holdings. They are richer. So then higher real wealth stimulates consumer spending and increasing quantity of goods and services demanded. The other cause should be the interest rate effect. When we face a lower price level that reduces the money people want to hold, people put this excess into the bank. So then we have more deposits into the bank, so then the interest rate falls. Lower interest rate stimulates investment and increase the quantity and services demanded. The third one should be the exchange rate effect. When we face a lower price level and then reduces the interest rate, then investors move from funds overseas to find better returns. So we have a lot of capital going outside the country. Then there is a more supply of local currency, which make the real value of money to fall. And as a consequence, we have like domestic goods and less expensive relative to foreign goods. So then because of this real value of money fall, so then more exports due to the cheaper goods and services, because our products at the end of the day should be like cheaper, so then should be demanded more from outside. Then they are not equal in importance, these three presented before. Money holdings actually are a small part in a household's wealth, and actually it is the least important. So then actually the other part, exports and imports, represents only a small fraction of GDP, and this is not a large effect. Then but actually the explanation for a downward slope of the aggregate demand should be more determined by the interest rate. And for understanding better this part, we are going to develop the concept of theory of liquidity preference. So then, what is this theory about? Well, this is based on the famous book of the General Theory of Employment, Interest and Money, written by John Maynard Keynes. Basically, this is due to, or it was the aim of this book to explain the factors that determine the economy's interest rate. And actually, the core of this book is that the interest rate adjusts the balance of supply and demand for money. It should be like, between quotation marks, the price of money. And then it is used to explain this model. In order to use this model, we need to keep constant expected inflation. And actually this is an assumption that could be like pretty close to real situations, which should be the idea of that inflation is typically stable. During the short run, there are no important changes, at least in economies that they are strong. Nominal rate and real rate is just a constant, because it's just a difference between them. And actually the real rate and nominal rate, it doesn't change because the inflation is stable. So then we assume during this model changes in nominal real interest rate actually is exactly the same. During the chapter 29, we already saw that the money supply in the US economy is controlled by Federal Reserve, and actually in different countries is controlled by the central bank. So we have Mexico, it should be the Mexican bank. We have in Colombia, we have Banco de la República, and then we have in Europe, we have the Central European Bank as well. Then it is changed throughout the quantity of reserves, or buying or selling government bonds. So here we have two important tools that the policymaker in monetary policy could use in order to change the quantity of money. The most important, actually, this is the process of buying and selling government bonds, or changing the reserves required by the bank. So then, when the Federal Reserve buys government bonds, actually you need to pay money for that instruments. So then it is paid and it is deposited in bank reserves. So banks, they acquire liquidity. So then there is an increase in money supply. This is at first it may be kind of confused, because you say, okay, it's buying, by how you're facing more money supply. Well, basically you need to, what are these government bonds? This is debt issued by the government, because they need to finance this gap between income and expenses. The income is the taxes, and the spending is basically the government spending. So in order to finance this gap, they need to issue bonds. When they issue bonds, actually, for example, they are in the market, and the central bank can buy them. And when they buy them, the banks, they provide these titles, and in the counterpart they receive this money back. Then when they receive this money back, they have this money available to lend to the customers. And then the Fed can change the quantity that it lends to the bank. So this should be the way when they increase the discount rate, because then the banks they have no more incentives to ask for money because the interest rate is higher. So then it could be a way to reduce the money supply in the economy. Or can change reserves of banks, so they could say, okay, for all deposits that you receive, you need to keep 10%. But imagine that now you need to receive, or you need to keep in your account 20%. So naturally, this increase in reserves provide a reduction or contraction in the money supply. So in this chapter, we will find how changes in money supply affect aggregate demand for goods and services. We determine that money supply is fixed based on the determination of the Federal Reserve. And then, for this reason, the money supply does not depend on other economic variables. Then, Federal Reserve can control how much money it lends to banks. So then, decrease of interest rate, it encourages banks to borrow money. It increases the money supply in the market. And then it can be changed with reserve requirements. We fix supply of money at fixed level according to Fed determination. So they, without any intervention, with an independent decision, they said what should be the quantity of money that should be circulated into the economy. It does not depend, as I said, on any economic variable. So it means it does not depend at this point on interest rate. So how we are going to draw this market? In the y-axis, we're going to put the interest rate, which should be like the price of money, and then in the x-axis, we're going to provide a quantity of money. We have here the downward slope demand, and here we have the monetary supply, which is not affected by the interest rate because it's provided by the Federal Reserve. So then we have this supply and there's demand. And here we have naturally, when these two curves they cross, we say that this is the equilibrium interest rate. So then this is the quantity fixed by the Federal Reserve. Imagine that we are at a point R1. So as you can notice here, the interest rate is higher than the equilibrium interest rate. So under this part, this M1D, what is going to happen? Well, actually, the idea is like the market will go this difference, this gap, that at this interest rate there is not possibility to have all this money. So here, because there is a gap, so here we have at this interest rate we demand this quantity of money, but the supply is this one. So we need to adjust, or we need to decrease to this part until we arrive to this part, and then we find the money supply equal to the money demand. Imagine the second scenario. We have like R2, which is the demand with this lower demand. We have this this part that is not adjusted, where the money demand is higher than the money supply. So for this reason, we need to go up to this part when there is the equilibrium, when there is the interest rate. Then money, as we know, is by definition the most liquid asset. And then any increase in interest rate increase the cost of hold money, because maybe you would rather put this money into a bank or buy any asset as bonds. When we face higher prices, more money is required for any transaction. So then it increases the level of quantity of money demanded for any given interest rate. So then in this part, when we have this one, we have an increase in prices develop automatically, an increase or shift to the right of money demand. Then when we under this situation, so we have a shift to the right. How we can express the same situation with the aggregate demand? So then here, when we have this situation of aggregate demand, we have here a move throughout the curve to y1 and y2. Remember, this is the level of output. This is not the quantity of money, this is the level of output. So here we have a decrease in the level of output, and increase in the price. Increasing the price provides a decrease in the output. So this is the representation of this market of money in this part, in the aggregate and aggregate supply and aggregate demand. Okay, so then here we have this other representation. When we have an increase, for example, in the money supply, what we're going to have here in this increase in the money supply and decrease in the interest rates, you know that likely we're going to face an increase in investment because of the lower interest rates. Imagine that you are tempted to buy a new house, and due to a lower interest rate, you would like definitely to acquire a new debt because of this decrease of the interest rate, and then the aggregate demand should be shift to the right. What is the role of the interest rate targets in Fed policy? Well, every 6 weeks at meetings of the Federal Open Market Committee, FOMC, they decide what should be the next interest rate in the economy. Sometimes better the interest rate than the process of buying, selling bonds, because you automatically fix what should be the equilibrium in this market, because sometimes it is difficult to measure the quantity of money that is in the market. When the Federal Reserve fixes this target, it is fixing the adjustment of supply and demand at this level. And then when FOMC raises the interest rate, it sells government bonds. Why? Because when it sells government bonds, actually this is like taking out money from the market, and when it's taking money out from the market, implicitly the money supply is going to the left, and then you are going to face a higher interest rate and a lower quantity of money into the economy. And when FOMC decreases the interest rate, it conversely buys government bonds. Then here it starts to have, when the monetary policy in this way is not more effective, this is when we are facing the zero lower bond. Then this is actually called in theory, in academics, as well as the liquidity trap, when there is not effective anymore. So even the interest is low, there is a problem. Well, actually could be the only way that maybe is low, but there is a promise that is going to be low, so you can take debt, and you're going to face these same low rates during the period of your investment. So the Federal Reserve can buy bonds as well. It could be another way when actually you are facing a liquidity trap, or actually in more specific ways, actually in 2008, and actually in this COVID-19 crisis, it starts to buy different titles to inject money into the economies, so they can buy mortgages, even corporate debt and long-term debt. And actually this actually called this part of quantitative easing. And actually when we have a moderate inflation, naturally it allows to pursue even negative real interest rates. So maybe for this reason we have even Japan, that where they are close to zero lower bound, because the interest rate, they are extremely low. However, they are facing maybe some moderate inflation that allows to have at least a difference between the nominal and real interest rate. So now let's move to the other part of this of this video. So we're going to talk now about the fiscal policy, how it influences aggregate demand. So government's choices on spending and taxes, these are the two ways how they can move the aggregate demand basically into with these tools, no, with these policies. So for example, let's think about the government that they need to buy fighter planes. So they call to Boeing to receive these planes, and then the demand for Boeing company, imagine that we have 20 million. So then in the first attempt we will say that there is an increase of 20 million in aggregate demand, but actually we can think that this could be larger if there is a multiplicator effect, or it could be lower if it is a crowding out effect, because this 20 million on the beginning, it naturally raises profits and raise employment. So these people use new resources to buy more goods and services. So this is the multiplier effect. So here we have again our here I'm sorry, I apologize. Here should be the prices and here should be the output. So this increase, we have an increase of the aggregate demand from AD1 to AD2 for 20 million, and then you can think that there is even an increase to AD3. Let's imagine, or let's set this as the final impact, because Boeing can also be tempted to use this money to increase investment or to buy another goods. So then this is MPC. We need to talk about the marginal propensity to consume. Basically this is for any dollar the quantity that is spent. So this is a value that it lies on 0 to 1, and then the closer to 1, you would say that you are spending more money now in consumption instead on, or could be saving or investing. No, could be the part. So then here we have, for example, 0.75. It means that for a 20 million increase, Boeing will impact in consumption in 15 million. So increasing 20 million, here I said that 20 million consumption, it could be that a consumer expending increasing 50 million. And then all the firms that they receive this money, imagine that they have exactly the same propensity marginal consumption. So then they will spend again this 75%, and then it will continue so on and so forth. So then actually this change in government purchases of 20 million, there is a first change in consumption of the marginal propension to consumption of times 20 million should be the second change, then should be the first change, then the second change should be this value again multiplied by this before. So we have the multiply the marginal propension to consumption square to 20 million, and then we are going to end up with the total change in demand with the sum of 20 million, which is the first, plus the marginal propensity to consumption times 20 million, then plus marginal propensity to consumption squared times 20 million, and then it continues. You imagine that they will be infinite, but actually it's not the answer, because when we have this one, I just collect this one by MPC, and then we have this expression. And actually in this way, as you can see, this is exactly the same expression as this, just if you change x by MPC, then you will have that the multiplier is exactly equal to 1 over 1 minus MPC. When we have an MPC of 3/4, we are expecting a multiplier of 4. So then if you invest, or you spend, sorry, $4 for example from the government, then if you multiply by 4, you're going to end up with a real increase of GDP of 4 times 4, 16. Then larger multiplier, larger increase. And now what about other application or other points of view of the multiplier effect? Well, it not only applies for government expenses, but also for any component of GDP, consumption, investment, government purchases, or net exports. So the idea is like the multiplier can amplify the impact in spending. But the point here, because of the aggregate demand expands to the right, at the end of the day, it could be the way that it also produces an increase in the interest rate, because of the demand for money should be higher and then should be facing higher interest rates. So it could be the counterpart that it can reduce investment, is what we call the crowding out. So it should be higher. If the multiplier is higher than the crowding out, it should be lower when the crowding out is higher than the multiplier. So what about this part on changes in taxes? So government can cut some taxes, so basically there is more available money to people, and this affected by the multiplier and crowding effect, as I said. So if the tax cut is permanent, so people, they are going to start to plan with this new income, so then should be more stable or more consumption. Otherwise, if there is not a real or trust change, people won't change their customs or their ways to consume. So then there is not going to be like really important change. So then this is the part. We have the possibility then to use the policy to stabilize the economy. So for example, when we have here the situation of equilibrium and here we have a decrease in aggregate demand, we can, from one side, this change in the aggregate demand should be caused by the raise in taxes. Then people, they have less money available to spend, so then the demand curve will shift to the left, so it depresses the product and employment. But Federal Reserve can expand money. How? They can buy government bonds. So then this way monetary expansion should reduce interest rate, and as a consequence we have here this situation will decrease the interest rate, and then the demand curve can return to the original place. So then this combination of fiscal monetary policy leaves the situation equal. From one side it was a contraction for the aggregate demand due to higher taxes. From the other side should be a shift to the right to the aggregate demand provided by the lower interest rates provided by the higher monetary supply. So actually it was an employment act provided by the government that it says that it promotes full employment and production. And Keynes said that the cycles are provoked by animal spirits, which actually we can say that this is like pessimism and optimism. That they said, well, people are pessimism, there is a contraction of the aggregate demand, what we are facing now, and when we are facing optimism, the aggregate demand should move to the right, and then the government has the necessity to change these cycles. And here the situation of against the active stabilization policy, this is a cartoon because there is a lot of bureaucracy to when the things are happening in the economy, and actually you have the data at the end of the month, at the end of the quarter, at the end of the year, and maybe you are already over the situation. So then you have here the situation of this horse, this going, the recession is coming, the recession is coming, then the recession is here, recession is coming, the recession is here, and then other one, the recession is already over due to the changes in the economy, but just here the action of the government. Wait, I have this stimulus bill, so it already happened. It already was advised, it was already here, and then it was over, and even after that is already the stimulus bill. So maybe sometimes it takes time. So for this reason, some economists, they say that the government should not move, because actually when they move the economy, they are providing even like worse scenarios. But I disagree, and more with the government policy, because imagine COVID-19 without any stimulus from the government, definitely the impact should be huge, even higher. Okay, so then this is the part. Another should be an automatic stabilizer, which is the tax system. So because you can actually increase or decrease the tax system, so you don't need that stimulus. So with this tax, which is between quotation marks faster, you can provide then a better adjustment into the economy. So then this automatic tax cut can reduce the magnitude of economic fluctuations, or there should be unemployment insurances when you provide like survive or salary to people. In the meantime, the economy gets better, and in the time they can get a new job. And then the conclusion is, like before any policymaker should consider all effects. It's not like you just need like to cut the taxes, or you just need to spend more. Definitely you need to take into account all the situation that you are going to move, and then the situation in the long and short run effect, because actually you need to be conscious. If you stimulus or over stimulus the economy, sometimes the prices should be affected, and at the end of the day the well-being of the economy on the people should be affected. Okay, I hope it has helped to understand better chapter 34. As always, if you like it, thumbs up. If you don't like it, don't thumbs down, please. I'm kidding. Okay, bye bye. See you next video. Bye bye.